Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 699. Today we talk about a mountain over 19,000 feet with 5 different climatic zones. It's the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, and it may be on your bucket list, as today we talk about climbing Kilimanjaro. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We carry on. It's episode 699, and let's talk about Kilimanjaro. I'd like to welcome to the show Kylie Chenn from Acanela.com, who has come to talk to us about, and we're going to pronounce this in a couple different ways, Kilimanjaro or Kilimanjaro. Kylie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And I say we're going to pronounce it a couple different ways because my recollection from Tanzania is the same as you were telling me before we started recording, is that the real name of the place is Kilimanjaro, which means?
So, Kilimanjaro means white mountain, which makes sense because it's, I think, the only white mountain, right, snow-covered mountain in all of Africa. Right.
Well, and I take your word for that. I was in Tanzania, I think, for 10 days, never saw the mountain, and I was on the mountain. the foothills of the mountain. Never saw the mountain, never saw the top until we flew out. So, which is not an uncommon thing, as I understand.
Yeah, a lot of clouds blow in, and when you're close to it as well, it's hidden in a sense. There's a couple peaks actually leading up to the main peak on Kilimanjaro, but it's often covered in clouds. So It really depends on when you're there. But I'm glad you got to see it flying out. That's often when people who don't do the climb get a chance to see it.
Well, and we're talking about a mountain in Tanzania, as I mentioned, really close to the border with Kenya. But why are we talking about it? Why should somebody think about climbing Kilimanjaro?
There's all sorts of travelers out in the world, and Kilimanjaro is very attractive for many, especially adventure travelers, because it is one of the 7 summits. It's the tallest mountain in Africa. It's technically speaking the tallest freestanding mountain. And I think because of those accolades alone, a lot of people want to climb it, not to mention that it's a hard climb. It's challenging, but it's not technical. It's not dangerous.
Hmm.
It's really anyone who's in good physical shape, they walk a lot or just in good fitness can do it. And so I think for that reason, it's along the equator. It's in a beautiful country, one of the best destinations to go on safari, Tanzania, the Serengeti,
Hmm.
that it's attractive for a lot of people. And it's not, yes, it's a climb. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's challenging, but it's not off limits to anyone. And that's exciting for a lot of people.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why when you pitched me, I wanted to do this show is honestly, if somebody pitched me summiting Everest, I probably wouldn't do that show. Not that that is an interesting story, but I really want to focus this podcast on adventures that people actually will do and actually can do. And so when somebody pitches me, I skateboarded across the U.S., it's like, that's nice. Good for you. Not for amateur traveler. But this is something that I've known people who have done it. It's certainly something that is achievable. So let's get into a little more detail. Because I can think of some of the punchlines of I've talked to the people after they've gotten off the mountain. When you arrive, tell me a little bit more about the experience. So how did you prepare, first of all, for climbing Kilimanjaro?
That's a question that comes up a lot. So Kilimanjaro, kind of to start with, there are many different routes up the mountain, but there are 4 or 5 common routes. One of those routes has huts. It's called the Marungu route. That's the one that I've done the most often.
And you say the most often, and I have to apologize for interrupting. How many times have you climbed?
I've climbed 3 times. So
Okay, I did not realize that. That's great.
2 of the times were the Marungu route. That's the one that I would say most travelers tend to do that one. All the other routes they're beautiful. They're different in many ways. They're camping routes and they take a little bit longer. So the Marungu route is a 1-week route. You
Okay.
6 night, 7-day experience in Tanzania. 5 of those days are on the mountain, pre-night and a post-night.
Mm-hmm.
Your average traveler, for people that are looking to go on an experience for a week, it's very, very doable. But all the other routes are great as well. But yeah, I mean, going back to preparing for the mountain, if we want to step back there, the number one thing I think that intimidates people from climbing any mountain, in particular from thinking about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, is for the preparation, the physical preparation, what that looks like,
Mm-hmm.
as well as this fear or of the unknown or fear that they might not be prepared. So, I mean, in preparing for Kilimanjaro, it's really mile climb up and down. So round trip. And you do go up about, I want to say 15,000 feet in elevation. So, you're gaining a good 3,000 to 4,000 feet a day, but you have 5 to 7 hours of very slow climbing to do that. And so really in preparing for the climb, it's really more about being active, being on your feet. The best way to prepare, and what I've done every time before I've climbed, is every day getting out on my feet, a walk, maybe a jog, maybe a hike for 30 minutes to an hour, or even a couple
Mm-hmm.
times a week. And it's really the extent. Maybe if you're not as consistently active in your life, maybe you can plan a little bit more ahead and do a little bit more, go to the gym, lift weights, that type of thing. But it scares a lot more people than it should. Yes, it's a hard climb, but really it's more about the duration, being able to steadily climb for several hours a day. It's a beautiful climb though.
Well, and you say several hours a day. I know that one of the reasons that it takes 5 days is to give you some time to get used to the altitude. It isn't that you couldn't theoretically climb faster, but that just wouldn't work for most people. So how much of the day are you climbing, except for the last day? And we'll do that separately.
Yes. The last day is that's the push. But every other day, you're climbing probably the equivalent of about 4 to 7 miles, just depends on the day. And that
Okay.
takes right around that same amount of time. I would say 5 to 7 hours is typically how much you're climbing each day. It's not steep uphill, actually. Slight incline, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit downhill, maybe flat, maybe a few steep parts, but it changes so frequently that you get time to really recover in a sense. So let me break out how the day goes. So typically you'll wake up in the morning, have around 6:30. You get up when the sun rises. Is what happens on the mountain. Usually you'll normally wake up at that time. You do breakfast and you set off. You meet with your crew. You get ready to go and you set off around 9 o'clock. And then you'll hike for about three hours, maybe 4, and then have a lunch break. You bring packed lunch with you that's prepared for you by the team there. And you get a nice break halfway through the day. And then usually the afternoon is a little bit less. So 2 to 3 hours of climbing. And then you will reach the next camp well before sunset. So you can settle in. They're beautiful, beautifully set locations. You can enjoy the view and then rest and relax before dinner, which happens right after the sun sets. So it's really kind of a nice flow. And that's every single day, as you mentioned, except the last day. You can spend more days on the mountain. 5 is the minimum. You can do 6, you can do 7. People choose to do that to give them extra time to acclimate, which really is the hardest piece of the mountain. You don't know how your body is going to take that high altitude. Like I said, not dangerous, but it can cause a headache or it can be uncomfortable and is the reason why people don't make it to the summit.
I was going to say, not dangerous for most people if you're with a guide who can spot that you're having a problem and can get you down off the mountain quickly if you need to.
It's important to go with a guide, and it's important to go with a team that's very well equipped and prepared with oxygen. Usually the teams will have a dedicated doctor and or guides that have been trained to understand the symptoms. And that way, if something does come up, one, they can help decide, okay, is there medication needed or what action needs to be taken? And then if you need to get down the mountain, you can. Yeah.
But it's not like climbing Everest where there's going to be some year this story of, oh, gee, we lost all these climbers who it's different kind of situation than that, which is why I wanted to differentiate. It's not this, but it's not completely safe either from that point of view. But there are ways to make it safe, I think is the right thing to take away from that. So we have a post on Amateur Traveler about someone who did a solo trip to Tanzania and climbed Kilimanjaro. And we had a negative comment because they said, well, she didn't do a solo climb. It's like, well, no, she didn't. It didn't say that in the post, but people were upset. But that is a very different experience than you're describing. You're describing, even if I went there by myself, if I'm going on a climb with guides and with people who are actually carrying stuff for me, it's a very different thing than a solo climb, which people do. You're not recommending it.
It's technically not allowed to do that on Kilimanjaro. I mean, people do it or they get special permission. It is possible, but it's not easy because mainly, right, the government of Tanzania who regulates the park wants to make sure that everyone is safe, wants to make sure that climbers continue to come. I believe last year they had over 50,000 climbers. So it's a mountain that many people love to experience. And I think because of that, they want to keep precautions in place. So your guide has to check you in at the mountain, register you, and accompany you up.
Well, because Kilimanjaro is a national park, too.
It's interesting. So one of the appeals to climb Mount Kilimanjaro is you're actually climbing through 4 different climatic zones. So you start in more of a jungle climatic zone, then you head up into the alpine forest, and then you go to the moorlands, and then you hit the tundra. So it's very beautiful in that sense.
Okay. Well, and let's actually back up here a little bit. So you fly in typically to Kilimanjaro Airport, I'm assuming. Near Arusha, which is also where you would base for a lot of the safari experiences in Tanzania, which we've talked about at other times on the show about. You mentioned the Serengeti, but also Ngorongoro, Manyara, Tarangire, a number of the different parks are also near Arusha. You, I assume, would recommend if you have 2 weeks, you don't just do the mountain, you do something else?
Yes, 100%. I would say if you're going that far, right? I mean, some people only have a week to travel, and definitely you can conquer the mountain in a week and have an incredible experience. But if you have 2 weeks, you're going that far, definitely recommend doing a safari in one of the 4 parks that you just mentioned, Tarangire, Lake Manyara, Ngorongoro, or the Serengeti. And then also Zanzibar is not too far. What's unique about, which is an island with beautiful beaches.
And a very different culture because it had more of the Arab influence.
So you really can get savanna, high mountains, and beach in one experience, which is very unique for a country. To your point, so you fly into Kilimanjaro International Airport, which is located right outside Moshi.
Which makes it sound a lot bigger than it is.
Yeah, it's a small airport, but you can find flights going there, and there's actually pretty great connections through Europe. I'm surprised at how accessible that they've made it. And then Moshi, yeah, is the entry point for Kilimanjaro. The starting point is less than an hour away. And then Arusha, which is about an hour drive from Moshi, is the gateway to the Serengeti for your safari experience. So it's all there, very, very close.
Well, and would you do the safari experience before you climb the mountain and then fly home after you climb the mountain, or would you do it in the other order? And I honestly don't know what you would recommend for that.
I would definitely recommend climbing first and doing the safari after.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are really hyped to climb the mountain. So it's nice to hit the ground and do it. And then you're going to probably be a little bit sore after. It's a lot of
Sure.
hiking. And so being able to just sit back in a safari vehicle and view wildlife and have that experience for several days, even 3-4 days after, is a perfect ending. So I recommend doing it after, just because it does give you time to rest and relax before you hop back on your international flight home. Get some of that lactic acid out.
Okay, so we fly into Kilimanjaro. We go over to Moshi first. We've got a night, and then we start climbing. And as you say, we're climbing at first in pine forest?
Yeah, it's actually, I think they call it technically the rainforest. So it's more of
Okay.
not a jungle, but very tropical, lots of birds. You can actually spot monkeys there as well.
That is the only part that I have done. I have technically climbed Kilimanjaro, just not to the top, but I was there on a trip with some people from my church, and we were at a church in Kikarara, which is there on the foot of the mountain. So up in that beautiful green area.
Beautiful.
And then we're in the park at this point. We're doing our first day of climbing, and we may see monkeys. What else is that first day going to be like?
Yeah, so the first day you enter through the gate and you're walking through the rainforest. It's actually a pretty well clear area to walk, and you have these beautiful trees, tall trees that are actually blocking a lot of the sun. So you have really great weather mostly. So it really is like hiking under a rainforest canopy. Different than what you get in the Amazon, but you can envision what that is like. Very green, beautiful bird noises. You pass a lot of waterfalls. You can spot monkeys. I think they do have a few other small rodents that you can see as well. Not cats, but similar type things. So definitely you want to keep your eyes open for what you can see. But I would say the most incredible thing across all climatic zones is the people that you're climbing with, not just the travelers, but your guides, the crew, the stories, the energy that they bring to the experience is a big part of it. You can just get lost in conversation, and before you know it, you're to the next camp.
Excellent. And how big a group typically am I with?
Like I said, I've climbed a handful of times, and I've climbed just myself and one other person. And I've also climbed with a group of 16. So you paint the picture. So if you're climbing a very small group yourself, maybe yourself and one other individual, you're probably going to have a team of at least 12 people getting you to the top. Maybe that's a couple guides, your lead chef. Yeah, the food is really good on the mountain, but by the way, we'll talk about that later. But then you have porters, and porters not just carrying your gear, but also carrying food, the cooking equipment, water on the last day, the sleeping bags. There's just a lot that goes into getting one or two people up to the top of the mountain. And then if you have a group of, say, 12 to 16, that's typically the largest size group that I would recommend going with. You can do more if you know each other, if it's a church group or family group, you can do more, but you're looking at probably having a crew of around 40 at that point. So,
oh my, okay. Wow. Okay. And what am I carrying?
Individual travelers that are going, what you do is you'll obviously dress for the day, usually have walking poles, have your hat, and you'll have a day pack. And that day pack is always recommended to be, I would say, between 15 and 25 pounds, depending on your size, if you're male or female, how much you can carry. And really all that's in it is your water for the day, your packed lunch, which is given to you in the morning, and maybe some sunscreen, your waterproof layers if you're not wearing those, and really things that you'll need for that 5 to 7 hours. That's all that you're carrying up. And then there's specific regulations, calls for packing your bag so that, like your larger bag with your things that you'll use throughout the entire climb, that a porter will take up for you.
Well, and you say dress for the day as if that were a simple, and that's going to depend a little bit. As I climb here, I'm going to start in maybe long pants. I was going to say shorts, but shorts are not quite as culturally.
You see it more often now, but it is appropriate shorts. Maybe the pants that kind of zip off, and you have the knee length shorts. Right. Definitely you see people in those when it gets hot.
Well, and I remember with women, it was recommended if you're spending a lot of time with locals, skirts and long pants and things, and not wearing
Yes.
your short shorts and things like that. It's not as appropriate in Tanzania. But I'm wearing that at the bottom. At the top, I'm going to be a lot colder if I'm wearing that. So the dress for the day is going to get increasingly more as I go up the mountain.
And every day is different. Every day you're essentially going to be wearing and packing different things as the climates change, because I mentioned there was 4 earlier. There's actually 5 climatic zones. I missed one of them.
Okay.
But they gradually change. And so, yeah, you start in equatorial weather, the jungle, the rainforest, which can be pretty warm, upward of 90s, maybe even break 100 at sometimes. And then you're in the Arctic tundra, technically, that type of climatic zone when you're summiting, which can get quite cold. It's still a mountain along the equator. And so, yes, it can get windy. Yes, it can get cold. But if you live in the Pacific Northwest United States, or even New York, and you've experienced winters there, it's equivalent. It's not like your Everest cold where, you can't get out because you're only up for so long. And if you dress well, you'll be just fine.
Well, and that's one of the reasons it is safer than Everest, too. It's not just that it doesn't go up as high, but it also starts from a lot warmer at the bottom. Excellent. And then the second day, what should I expect?
The second day, so the first night on the mountain, if you're hiking the Morongo route, you'll overnight at Camp 1. And then the second day is when the climate will really change more into a heather tundra, which means that you're not getting the tall trees. You're hiking out of the tree line that day. So you're starting in the end of the rainforest. And by the time you get to Camp 2, you'll be essentially hitting the moorland. So you'll be going from rainforest through the heathers and approaching the moorland area. And so that's a pretty cool day. Day 2 is one of my favorite days to climb. Once again, you're going up several thousand feet in elevation, climbing several miles, and it's about a 5 to 7 hour day. But the scenery is changing so drastically that you always have something to watch out for, and it's pretty exciting.
Highlight for that day?
3 main highlights. One, the different zones that we're talking about, the scenery. Second is the people. The porters, they will go ahead of the climbers with all the gear because it can be, it's in their best interest to get up to the top as soon as they can. But the guides and assistant guides will stay back and talk with the climbers, and it's really interesting to learn about their culture, what life is like on the mountain. That's definitely a highlight. And the third highlight, I actually mentioned wildlife that you see, but one thing that I think surprises a lot of people is there are a lot of chameleons along the route, and they hang out around the sides, and people don't know going into it. But if you go into the climb knowing that there are chameleons along the route, keep your eye out for them. You will see dozens of chameleons, and they are very, very cool, quite big too. So I think we had at least a dozen chameleon stops to just watch and observe them, watch them eat things around them. You have the very interesting eyes and the tongue that can go out several feet to catch a fly. Very, very cool. So the wildlife, I would say, even the small reptiles and mammals that are on the mountain, especially in the lower zones, are very, very cool to experience. Many people never get to see them in the wild. So
Interesting. Chameleons did catch me by surprise.
yeah.
Cool. And then the next day, you say in the moorlands.
So the next day, you are...
It seems odd to be in moors.
I know, right? It's beautiful, though. You actually get beautiful little pools on the ground. You have these Dr. Seuss-like looking trees. There's a lot of indigenous plant life on the mountain, which is very, very cool. So yeah, after you essentially sleep at Camp 2, which is the Harumbo huts, you're climbing day 3 to a base camp, which is...
And those are the round huts, as you're talking about there.
They're actually like A-frames.
A-frames. Oh, okay. Okay.
There's a variety of kind of different ones that they have up there, but typically, yeah, they're A-frame. So yeah, that third day you're hiking actually to base camp, which is right under 15,000 feet. Kibo Hut is what it's called. So you're actually leaving or starting in the moorland, hiking through the moorland, and you actually end in the alpine desert, which is really where there's no more wildlife, no more plant life, no more water. You actually have to carry you don't, but the team will carry water from Harumbo camp to Kibo because there's no water when you get up that high. And it's just really, really cool experience to see the whole production and how much goes in essentially summiting this mountain together.
Well, and how often am I going to be doing this hike in clouds if I have never seen the mountain, for instance, except for the flight out? Or how often am I going to have great big wide open views?
It really depends on when you climb, but I would say.
And that was going to be one of my questions for later, but yeah, let's get to it now.
So there are several different seasons in Tanzania. You have rainy season, you have
the long rainy season, the short rainy season, the long dry and the short dry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So many seasons, meaning 2 seasons that we think of, but technically 4, the long and short of both the dry and wet.
Right.
So I've actually climbed in the middle of the wet season and in the dry winter season. And so I've had both experiences.
Well, and let's put them on a calendar too. When is the long dry, the short dry?
So, end of December through mid-March, end of March, that is the dry season. So that's a really good time to climb. You're right after the short rain season, which is a November, December. And then the long rain season comes right after. So approaching April, May, that's the long rainy season. And then most of your summer months, June, July, August, September, even into October, is once again a dry season. So you're looking at start of the year as well as your summer months into the beginning of fall as the best times to climb. So I've climbed in May, which was the heart of rainy season. And the clouds did break a couple of times and we had those great views, but most of the time it rained. I think we saw maybe 3 other people on the mountain. The reason I climbed it then, it was my first climb, was because I was living in Africa at that time and it was the only time frame that I could climb. Incredible experience, but I do know what it's like to climb the mountain in rain. It's still worth it. It's definitely a great experience, but you're wet. You're wet a lot of the time. So bring great rain gear and have a great attitude, but I would do it again. But if I could choose, I would climb in January, February, March, or July, August, September, leaning more towards September, October, because the summer months can get a lot of travelers. And so it's more trafficked. And so you want to kind of avoid that. But when I climbed this last time, I climbed in February, which was great weather. We had no rain, incredible views. Clouds rolled in and out, so we didn't get blasted by the sun, which is also something to be aware of. The sun is very, very intense that high. So people get sunburns without knowing it. And there's a way to prepare for that, obviously. But
yeah, this is definitely don't just wear sunscreen or bring a hat kind of place. Yeah. Well, and in terms of wildlife in Tanzania, you want a time, if you're going to have that extra week to go see on a safari, it seems like that's a little different in terms of the timing there for like the Great Migration.
Yes.
I want to say that's more May, June. Am I remembering correctly?
There's a couple migrations. The wildebeest migration that a lot of people think of tends to be November, actually. So it's actually right before and into the short rainy season. But the wildlife will have their young come the spring, and so come May, June, there is another mini migration with essentially after the birthing.
Hike one way in one season and back in the other. So
you can match it. It's something to be aware of, but usually you'll hit the tail end or start of one of the migrations right after one of your climbs. But it's definitely doable and something to think about.
Excellent. So we're to that last day, I think.
Yes.
Which I have talked to people who have summited and then quickly jumped on a plane and with me flying out of Tanzania, and they said it was the worst day of their life. And they would do it again, right? But this is harder.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, the first few days are actually not that hard. They're very enjoyable. You're going slow. They say pole pole on the mountain, right? Go slow, take your time. Hakuna Matata is used frequently as well. No worries. Very take your time, acclimatize, enjoy what's around you. It's great. That last day is also slow. All those same things apply. But instead of having a little bit of up, a little bit of down, some flat, you're essentially, right, traversing up the volcanic caldera to reach that first summit. And typically what happens, so let's go back. So, right, you reach Kibo Huts, you're in the Alpine Desert, you're overnighting there on your third night. What happens is, overnight is a light word. So typically you'll do dinner.
I was going to say.
You'll do dinner.
What time do I get up?
You'll do dinner and you'll go to bed essentially right after that. So I would say people try to
Mhm.
get in bed between 7 and 8 sometimes because of nerves or whatever. It can be a little bit later, but
Mhm.
the goal is to get.
Of course, you've also been hiking for 3 or 4 days. You probably don't have a whole trouble falling asleep. Okay.
The altitude, though, so the interesting thing about Kibo huts is it's right under 15,000
Mhm.
feet elevation, and 15,000 feet is typically where people start to really feel the elevation, and so it can be hard to sleep.
Right.
Sometimes people lose their
Okay.
appetite
Makes
a little
sense.
bit. Nothing serious normally, but a lot of times there are mild symptoms, and it can be difficult for some people. But try to contain all of those, get a few hours of sleep, and then wake up call is normally at midnight. And the reason for that is because the goal is to get to that first point, which is Gilman's Point, which is the first summit on the crater's rim. And the
Mhm.
goal is to get up there by sunrise. And it can take a good 6 hours to get up there because it's not that
Mhm.
far. I mean, you're going up maybe several thousand feet in elevation, only a couple of miles, but you can't go straight up because of the altitude. You have to zigzag very slow.
Now, when you say a good 6 hours, I've heard it described as having, from the altitude, a headache like the worst hangover you've ever had, and you're walking on screes, so for every 2 steps you take forward, you slide one back. Is that about right?
Here's the thing, it's different for everyone. So I've had several
Yeah.
different experiences, two different experiences in particular on this route. The first
Hmm.
time, which was several years ago, I remember it being so hard. I don't remember the headache, but I remember my legs feeling so tired. I
Hmm.
was a lot of climbing. I probably didn't prepare for it as well as I should have. I didn't have any symptoms of altitude, actually. It was very happy in that sense, but your body can get tired. And so I remember it being so hard. So when I climbed the second time this route, which was a little over a month ago, I was prepared for it to be so hard. And it actually surprised me. I don't
Okay.
remember it. It was easier than I remember it. I wasn't tired. I had no headache. I got to the top pretty easily. But that being said, out of the 15 other people in my group, there were 17 of us, 15 of us made it to the Guru Point, the top, very top. And 2 people made it to Gilman's and Stella's. So they made it to the top, but not the final peak. And it was due to headaches and mild altitude symptoms, and they needed to go back down.
Okay.
Everyone, it affects differently, but yeah, I mean, migraines are something to be aware of. Being very tired, feeling like you can't
You got me up
breathe.
at midnight, so that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So all
Right,
those
sure.
things, yeah, are definitely something to prepare for.
And I want to underline you're doing this in the dark. So you got a headlamp on, you can see the guide's shoes in front of you, and that's all you're seeing until you get this glorious sunrise, I'm assuming, here from Gillen's Point.
It's incredible. I mean, if you've experienced sunrises in Africa, I mean, watching the sunrise from Gilman's Point it's incredible. It's beautiful. And I think also you're so ready to sit down and so proud of yourself for getting up there that it makes it that much sweeter.
Mhm.
You get to see the whole thing from like the moment the sun peaks to the pinks and the oranges to the yellows to the sun coming fully up over the horizon.
Well, you mentioned 2 people did have to turn back or decided to turn back. I'm not sure which it was in this case. Sometimes I'm going to have a choice and sometimes I'm not going to be given a choice. Is that the most likely point that that's going to happen? Or are there some people who, if they're going to have problems, might have problems a little before this?
From my experience climbing as well as taking people, hundreds of people on
Mm-hmm.
climbs or overseeing that, is most people, like 99.9% of people, will be just fine getting to base camp, getting to Kibo. Once people arrive, they settle in for dinner and they're trying to fall asleep. That's typically when symptoms will start to spike. A headache or nauseated, I throw up my food. Those are 2 things, headache and not being able to keep your food down, that are common symptoms of mild altitude sickness. And for a few people can start at Kibo, but I would say normally people are fine. Wake up at midnight, they're tired, and they start climbing. That 6 climb up to the top, that's when I would say people will start to feel symptoms as well. And it really kind of depends. I mean, having like a light headache is something that's common and people fight through, and that's not something that will send you
Sure.
back down the
Yeah.
mountain. If you start having this pounding migraine and that's not normal, that's something that, one, people typically choose to turn back down, and also the guides are trained to be able to know when to make that call for you. And then the other thing would be extreme tiredness,
Mm-hmm.
not being able to keep your food down once again. But I would say, like I said, The summit rate is actually pretty high for Kilimanjaro. If you're with the right group, it's 95% plus. And so if you think about it, it's not like the other 5% of people die. A lot of people think that. It's just the other 5% of people get the headaches or are extremely tired.
It is on Everest, right? I mean, that's a very different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't even compare them really. It's people do in their minds. But
When 50,000 people haven't summited Everest for that reason too.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly. There's only a handful of people that die in Kilimanjaro each year, and it's usually always due to underlying health conditions. So 50,000 people going up, and people are going to have things that they're not aware of that happens. So that's really great. And as far as numbers and stats go, and it's why a lot of people can attempt the climb in good confidence that they can summit, as well as know that they're not going to put their life in danger, which is really important, I think, to be a conscious traveler in that sense. But people will start to feel things going up. You might feel nothing. You might just breeze to the top, to be honest. You might have a headache.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a worse headache. You might get nauseated or even have more extreme altitude symptoms. And that's when going with a crew is important.
Yeah, that part is not particularly related to how fit I am, that one's a little harder to prepare for, except maybe doing more altitude beforehand.
It's really hard to prepare for living in a state where you can summit a few peaks over 15,000 feet. That helps mainly because it'll show you what your body feels like in that type of environment and help you feel more calm when you're on the mountain. Because a lot of people have never felt that. Yeah. And so it can create this sense of panic sometimes. But there's not really any way to train for it, which is interesting. And it's not really related to age. It's not related to fitness level. It's really random there.
Which can be frustrating for the runner who's in great shape, who has to go down while the overweight accountant is going to the top. But it just happens.
There are two things, though, that you can do to control that a little bit, altitude symptoms. And one is usually the slowest person on Kilimanjaro is the winner, is what they say. The person that takes the most time to climb, controls their breath, and takes it step by step, those are the people that make it to the top with no problem. And also you can take medication. Mm-hmm. Diamox is a common one, and it's an altitude medication. It's recommended for people to take. Not everyone does. Mm-hmm. I personally chose to take it both times I climbed, and it definitely helped.
Excellent. So I got to Gilman's Point. Most of you went on. You're spending a little more time at the summits. At this point, you're in snow. You've got great views. Yeah,
you get to Gilman's Point, you have great views, right? You're watching sunrise, you're on the Crater's Rim, and you're starting to get into snow. You're not going to be in full snow, but it's going to be rocky and you're going to have patches of snow. Walking then next to Stella's Point, which is probably an hour or so walk up. It's not steep though. Now you're walking along the Crater's Rim, which is nice. It's high altitude, so you're still taking these deep breaths, but you're not, the hard part is over, is what I like to say. Mm-hmm. That's when you'll start to get into more snow. And then from Stella's to Uhuru Peak, which is the tallest peak, it's the final summit. It's in about another hour or so. Really just depends on your speed. It can be 30 minutes. It could be an hour and a half, right? It's just so different. That's where you'll actually see glaciers, the only glaciers in Africa. You don't walk on them. There aren't crevices. We get that question a lot. They're quite far away. You're on more of a paved path through the snow, getting to the top, but you can see glaciers out to the side, which is really cool. Uhuru, when you get there, it's typically pretty windy, and your time is limited there because the sun is harsh, and you're the highest altitude there. It's under 20,000 feet, and that can affect everyone's bodies different. So it's in everyone's best interest to take 10 to 15 minutes and then to go back down. Yeah.
Well, and you say go back down. We climbed very slowly up the mountain. It took us 4 days or something like that. So I assume we take 4 leisurely days to get back down again.
For Kilimanjaro, actually, that's actually not the case. The reason why Summit Day is difficult is because you summit, you're so excited, that's great. And then the team won't tell you this beforehand because you need to be focused on the summit when you're summiting, but you actually go back down and you don't stay at base camp. You go all the way back down to the second camp, which is Harumbo huts. And the reason you do that is because of the altitude factor. So you want to get down, and by the time you get down, you're so grateful to be in lower altitude, but you get up, you usually summit around, let's say 8 a.m. You get back down to the base camp in time for lunch break. You can take a nap, rest, relax, eat some lunch. You're going to be very tired, and then come down slow. But then you go down after lunch to Harumbo Hut, which is good 5 or so miles. It's down, so in theory easier, but you're tired, it takes a while. So typically you'll get back down just before dinner. So midnight wake up call, and with a few breaks, you're climbing essentially all the way until dinner. But that sounds like a lot, but when you break it up piece by piece, it actually is very, very doable.
When I have talked to people who, for instance, who did say it was their hardest day ever, they're not talking about that last piece, even though you're very tired, but you are getting down off the mountain and getting into better altitude and such. They're talking about that.
The summit, yeah. And you're also very excited after the summit. You're very, that you actually, most people never remember going back down. You don't remember it. And so that's why typically it's not talked about a lot. It's really the hard piece, and where you really need your motivation is the summit day, getting to the summit at midnight.
Excellent. Well, we've got you down off the mountain. Anything else you want to make sure that people know about this experience?
I would say one thing that a lot of people don't realize until you've climbed is a lot of people think that it's the mountain that changes them. I think it's the mountain that is the experience that they're going after and what they're conquering. And that is a huge piece of it. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is the culture and connection that you build with the team that you're going up with. Because, I mean, these crews are made up of people from villages at the base of Kilimanjaro, and their energy and their soul and the singing every morning before you climb, your whole crew will get out and sing to really, the idea is to give you the energy and the positivity that you need to conquer that day. And they sing to you even as you're walking. They have these big smiles on their faces. It's that aspect. They join you for dinner sometimes. The food on the mountain is incredible. We didn't talk about that, but the way that they fuel your body is incredible. What they can do with the limited resources that they pack up and down. It's some little small things that I think really you actually remember as much or more as the climatic zones and that summit moment. Yes, you're at the summit, but you're also there with your guide that helped you through every single day, and you're taking that picture together and you're celebrating together. That's a really cool aspect of the mountain. It's more than the mountain. You get a huge glimpse into the culture of the country.
Again, I haven't climbed to the top of the mountain at all. We can't really say that I've climbed Kilimanjaro, even though I have. But I have said the same thing about Tanzania, that in my case, you go for the animals and you come back for the people.
Exactly.
And I swear that any 3 Tanzanians can break into 4-part harmony as far as singing goes.
Oh, yes. Probably 2.
I have not forgotten the food, though. Probably 2. I have not forgotten the food. So what am I eating on the way up?
The food is quite good. So when you arrive at camp, typically they'll have coffee, hot chocolate, Milo, popped popcorn, some snacks out for you so you can get some energy before dinner. And then for dinner, they always serve a soup first. And it's really impressive, great soups. Sometimes pumpkin soups, some vegetable soups, broccoli soup. A lot of really, really good. They're salted well. It's really incredible. I'm a foodie, actually, and so I pick up on small things. And it's, to me, incredible that they can keep such great flavor so high up on a mountain. But they'll also do a lot of vegetable dishes, a lot of bean dishes. You will get some meats. Typically, you're eating a little bit less meat because it's hard, obviously, to keep cold and to
to
have access to it on the mountain. So dried meat or dishes that are more veggie heavy. Also chapatis. So think like a non-bread equivalent you'll eat. Lots of rice. So it's actually quite diverse. It's family style. So they'll bring out quite a few different dishes and you can share them. You can choose to eat more of what you like most. And yeah, it's really impressive. All the food is warm, which is really appreciated, especially as you get higher up. And it's typically food that carries a lot of water strategically because, right, the more water you can get in your body also helps fight altitude sickness. So soups, vegetables, hot drinks, that type of stuff.
And with hot drinks, you mentioned Milo, and I'm not sure that everybody knew where you were going with that. So you're talking about a chocolate and malt powdered mix. If you're from Australia, I'm sure you're familiar with this, or that part of the world, but most of us are less familiar with it than that.
Yeah, It's most people don't know what that is in the United States or Western world, I would say. It's an Australian drink. So yeah, great call out.
Well, if we want to start to wrap this up, the prettiest spot on Kilimanjaro, where are you standing? What are you looking at?
I would say never miss a sunset or a sunrise on the mountain. The camps are put in places for a reason. And when the cloud layer breaks, which typically always happens at sunrise and sunset, it's beautiful. So like I can close my eyes now and still see it. Best moments on the mountain as far as views go, and these beautiful moments are waking up right before sunrise and going and sitting out and looking at the view and watching the sun come up on every camp, and doing the same at sunset. Never miss a sunrise or a sunset on the mountain. That's also a huge piece of advice I would give everyone climbing.
And one thing that makes you laugh and say only on Kilimanjaro.
Yeah. So a lot of people ask about the toilet situation, right? So there's bush toilets,
Sure.
right? And one of the funny things that you'll get told is there's certain language for when you have to go to the bathroom. You say either I need to send a text or I need to send a fax. And sending a text is a quick one, and sending a fax is if you need a little bit more time and probably some extra toilet paper. So that's a funny joke that's long-standing on the mountain, and guarantee if you climb, you will be using that lingo as well.
Got it. Our guest again has been Kylie Chenn from Acanela.com. And we didn't talk about what Acanela means because I had to ask.
Yeah, I commented at this a second ago when I said I'm a foodie. When I first got into travel, actually, it was really focused on cultural connection and experiences through food. So canela, the Latin word for cinnamon, and is Latin for the cinnamon. And I was always very fascinated with this Silk Road and the spice route, how those were some of first multi-country expeditions where a lot of cultural exchange happened. And I think I just kind of, when I was building my own place in travel, starting a travel company, expedition company, I wanted to incorporate that into the name. I was also, several years ago, I was quite young. And so I thought, Acanela is perfect. And it's just stuck ever since. It's hard to pronounce for many people. But once you get it sticks. And that's the history behind it. And food is still a big part. Every experience that we do, as well as I would say anyone's travel experience, food is really a medium to connect with the local people.
Well, and I do want to highlight here, we want to thank Kylie for joining us, but she can also take you. So she is from Acanela Expeditions, and so they do, I would say, adventure travel. Is that the right way to talk about what you do?
Small group adventure travel. Yeah, that's our niche.
Excellent. And so we'll put a link to that, to their website in the show notes. Do you have any posts about Kilimanjaro on your website that we should also highlight?
Yeah, actually, we have quite a few. In particular, we have one that if you actually Google climbing Kilimanjaro, it'll show up probably on the first page. It's something I wrote on 10 things I wish I knew before climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. That's definitely a must read for people looking to climb. Yeah.
Kylie, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for the White Mountain.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Our next meeting will have to be climbing the summit. I think we need to get you to the top, Chris.
We shall see. In news of the community, first thanks to two new Patreon patrons, Alistair Brown and Simon Vo, who've joined the other people who are helping support this show. I truly appreciate it, and I'm glad you're in a situation where you feel you can afford that these days. For the episode we did on Costa Rica, I heard from Jeff Ulfs, patron and friend of the show, who told me something I did not know about Monteverde Cloud Forest Preserve, which we talked about in the Costa Rica episode we did recently, and that's that it was a private-run preserve started by Quakers who immigrated from Alabama in the 1940s. Did not know that. He also said that if you go to Manuel Antonio National Park, it's a great place to see the Jesus Christ lizard, which runs on its hind legs across water. That would be interesting to see. Thanks, Jeff. With that, we're going to bring this episode of Amateur Traveler to a close. Next one is episode 700, and we're celebrating it as we've done all of these other round episodes by doing another episode. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We have episodes coming up on Northern Arizona National Parks, Southern West Virginia, Senegal, and the Gambia. Don't forget to check out the Amateur Traveler store, and as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more.